and welcome to my Oscars Thoughts video series. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the nominated shorts. I was lucky that I was able to see, well, lucky in a sense, all of these shorts over one weekend, and so I could kind of like contrast and compare and collect my thoughts. And I also saw these shorts with other people so I could talk about them at the same time, because I think that's really important. If I'd just been sat there to ruminate on my own, I think I would have been like, oh, what was I thinking about that one again? Whereas actually verbalizing it really helped. So I'm going to go in the order that I saw them in. So I will talk about the animated shorts first, then the live action shorts, then the documentary shorts. If you only want to hear my thoughts on one of these, I'll leave timestamps in the description box so you can move along to, say, the documentary shorts if you don't want to hear about the animated shorts. Okay, so animated short films. There are 5 of them, but we were also able to see the 2 that got given highly commended. So I'll mention those at the end of the animated shorts. So the first film we saw was Bow, which if you have seen Incredibles 2, you will have seen this one because it is the Pixar short that was at the beginning of Incredibles 2 about a dumpling that grows up and goes off, and I think the first time I saw it, it did make me cry. Because I watched it at the weekend, it was the second time I saw it, I knew it was going to happen, so it didn't make me cry. So obviously it did give me an emotional reaction. I thought it was okay, but I am a big fan of the Pixar shorts and I don't think it was their best one. I have others that I preferred over this one, and this has like no dialogue in it as well, so that was quite interesting. Then the next one we saw was Late Afternoon, which is an Irish film, and is following this lady who has either dementia or Alzheimer's, and her daughter comes and brings her a cup of tea, and this cup of tea brings back some memories from her childhood. Then she has a biscuit and that brings back some memories, and we see her kind of like immersing herself in these objects and seeing her memories through these objects. The animation style on this one was really quite simple, and so it felt like a bit of a children's cartoon. There was a lot more dialogue in this one compared to Bow, but still not a lot of dialogue. And when we first went into her memory, I thought, oh, this is interesting, but then it happened another 3 or 4 times in the film, and after so many times I was just like, okay, we're going into a memory now, this again. It again had quite an emotional ending, which was a bit of a downer in a way, but it just wasn't my favourite. It was okay. And then we saw one called Animal Behaviour, which felt a little bit like it could have been an episode of like Family Guy or South Park or American Dad. It felt that kind of animation style and that kind of writing. I almost expected Seth MacFarlane to pop up, but it was good and quite funny, but it felt very different from the other films, and so I'm not sure how it ended up in this category in a way, which sounds really awful, but yeah, it was almost like everything else had a serious message with it, and this was just a bit of fun. It was this dog leading a sort of therapy support group with a range of other animals, including a blood-sucking leech and a praying mantis, and then this gorilla comes in and he's obviously very angry, and they kind of try and get to the bottom of it. Like I say, it was funny, but it seemed a little bit pointless. I'm not sure what message it was trying to give. Then we had one called Weekends, which was very dark and very somber and had no dialogue in it, about a little boy whose parents are obviously separated, and so he spends weeks with his mum and weekends with his dad, and we see him going between the two and the kind of the house that he's moved into with his mum, what's going on there, and then the apartment that he goes and visits his dad in and what's going on there. Both of the parents along the course of the film get new partners and how that affects him, and it's just really quite sad and quite depressing. It was interesting seeing the difference in the little boy in the two settings, but in the end he was still quite an unhappy little boy, and I wanted to kind of reach in and help him a little bit, but it was quite like and then the last one in the nominated category is the one that I liked the best. It was my favourite, and so on my ballot it has got my vote. And it is One Small Step. We see this little girl who is being raised by, I couldn't work out whether it was her father or her grandfather, either way, a male caregiver, and he makes her these space shoes because she's obsessed with space when she's little. He also, we see him fix her other shoes as the film goes on, and it's a really sweet relationship between the two of them. We see her grow up to be a teenager and kind of not really give him much recognition, just take the dinner he's made and off she goes. But it's a really sweet film, and as the film progresses, so does her interest in space. There are things that happen to try and dishearten her or try and hold her back, and some of those things are quite sad, but in the end it's about her having that love and support and really going after what she wants. And it is a, you know, female in that STEM field, and I think that's one of the reasons that I really liked it. So it was definitely my favourite. However, there were two in the highly commended category that I definitely would have replaced two from the actual nominated category with, because I thought they were so good. The first one is about a pirate who finds this treasure box. When he opens it, it's empty and he's really disappointed. However, then his monkey reaches in and like is really hungry. He reaches in and he pulls out this banana because obviously he's very hungry, and the pirate's like, oh, what went on there? Try that again. Reaches in, pulls out another banana, and so the pirate's like, I have an idea. I could get this monkey to pull me treasure out of the box. Even though it was empty, the monkey can bring some out of the box. So he shows the monkey all these things that he wants him to pull out of the box, and the monkey, because the monkey really wishes for food, just keeps pulling edible things out of the box. Then the pirate realizes that he has a gold tooth, and so that must be worth some money, and he pulls out his gold tooth and shows this to the monkey. The monkey then starts pulling gold teeth out of the box, but obviously they're on a ship. Gold teeth are quite heavy. What's going to happen to the ship? Be careful what you wish for. I thought that was really clever, and it kind of like bridged that gap between being like funny and sweet and having a good message. It wasn't as sad as some of the others as well. And then the final one that we saw was called Tweet Tweet, and just featured this rope running across the screen, and we see this bird on this rope. Then we have the addition of a baby, and we see the baby's feet only. The baby's feet then turn into little girls' feet and women's feet, and then the women's feet are joined by a man's feet, and we see that progression. And as the woman and the bird go through various situations, sometimes the rope changes into like party lights, like fairy lights. Sometimes it changes into barbed wire, and then at the very end of the film we see the rope kind of coming to an end, and the feet are aged feet, and it just told a real story, and told a story that had some highs and lows, but finished on a really like hopeful ending. And if you ask me what was the favourite out of all of them, that one was probably my favourite out of all of them. But as it's not nominated, I'm going with One Small Step. So then on to the live action short films. Oh my goodness, these were so not depressing, but yes, depressing. These were the second lot of films we saw, and then it was time to leave the movie theatre, and we all left the movie theatre like So the first, I can't find my live action shorts, where are they? I need my titles. The first film was called Mother, and was about and this was a Spanish film, and it was about a woman who gets a phone call from her son, who is in France with his father. They've gone to the beach, but the son calls up and says, I don't know where daddy is. When's daddy coming back? I don't know where I am. There's nobody else on this beach. And obviously the panic progresses as the film progresses. The mother tries to get the police to help. She can't really get the police to help. Then we find out there's another man on the beach. How's he going to be involved in the situation? And this film does not have a satisfying conclusion. It is a short film, obviously. And then it just ends. The tension builds and builds and builds. And then it just ends. So that was the start. Then we had one called Marguerite, which is about a woman who has home help. And she has some sort of kidney disease. She also seems to be quite unsteady. And so she has a doctor or a carer come in every day, and we see their relationship grow and develop, and we see her being cared for and then having a conversation with her carer, and she finds out that her carer is gay, and then we find out that actually she was in love with a woman in her past, and she kind of very slowly, this comes out, and we just see their relationship progress, which it was a nice story, and it was nice to watch it progress, but again, it doesn't exactly end on a hopeful note, and so it was definitely a bit of a downer. Then we have one called, I believe it's Fauve or Fauve, and it follows two little boys who are playing. We watch them playing. It's subtitled. I can't remember where it's set at all now off the top of my head, but yeah, we see them playing in some quite dangerous situations, and then they go down into this quarry, and we find out that there's like sort of quicksand in this quarry, but one boy believes that his friend is kind of having him on, that he's getting stuck in the quicksand, and goes into the quicksand and basically gets stuck, and you can imagine how that ends for him. And we see his friend really trying desperately hard to get some help and to get someone to help him, and we also see his friend in kind of the aftermath of the incident. And again, it's just a real downer, and I don't understand kind of the message that it was getting across. It was just really depressing, and I don't really want to see children die as part of a movie experience, really. That's just me. Then we had a film that was made called Detainment, which is made about the James Bulger case and the two boys that took him and eventually killed him. And we see it from them messing about in the shopping centre to them taking him, and then them being interviewed by the police. And it was interesting to see it from that point of view, and the film is based on the tapes that have been released of those interviews, and obviously the stories from the media from the time. But at the end, it obviously says there were some tapes that were never released because they were deemed too shocking. They weren't released to the jury. They'll never be released in the media either. So that's kind of as much as we know of up until that point. I have since found out that the parents of the parents in general of all the children involved didn't kind of know about this film and didn't give their permission about this for this film, which seems quite a shocking thing. I thought it was quite well done in terms of the screenwriting and the direction, but because this is an Irish film, they obviously used Irish actors, and then these Irish actors were putting on these Scouse accents because of where it's set, and these Scouse accents on the whole were really bad, and I found it really off-putting. One of the child actors in particular, the sentence would start with a little bit of a Scouse accent, and then the rest of the sentence would just be in an Irish accent, and that did bother me the whole way through, so it was hard to kind of focus on what was going on. So whilst I thought the film was well done in most respects, having found out that they didn't get permission to make the film, and then also the accent thing bothers me too much that it really can't be my pick, even though, yeah, but it was really tough going as well. Obviously, if you know the story of that case, watching a film about it after the fact, no, it's not fun. And then the last one we picked is the one that gets my vote, the one that I not enjoyed, but the one I thought was the best. I didn't enjoy it at all. I didn't enjoy any of these. It's called Skin, and is to do with two gangs who do not really start off as rival gangs, but then end up as rival gangs. We see this white family go with their friends and go for a day of kind of shooting and grilling, and then an incident occurs with a black guy at another checkout in a supermarket, and the father of the little boy that we see in the film believes that this guy has been messing with his son and shouldn't have been interacting with his son in any way, and calls him lots of names as he is leaving the supermarket. He then calls up his friends who he's been drinking and shooting and grilling with all day, and they basically attack him in the car park. And then we get to see how the friends of the black guy, his sort of gang, retaliate, and I am not going to spoil the end of the film because I think it is one that's definitely worthy of a watch. It's got some very good messages in there. It was really shocking and really emotional, but it was really well done, and it definitely had an impact on me, so it would be my pick for the win. And then we have the 5 nominated documentary shorts. Sorry this film is so long, but we are talking about 17 different films here. So the 5 documentary shorts, let me find my titles again. I don't know why all the shorts are not together. There we go. The first one is called Black Sheep and is about a guy whose family live in Peckham, and then the Damilola Taylor incident occurs. He was basically stabbed on his way home from school in a stairwell, left to die. And so his family think that they should probably move away from that area. So they move to Essex, but unfortunately they move to a predominantly white housing estate, and the people in that housing estate are incredibly racist. He gets attacked, and then he decides that, right, okay, so if you can't beat him, join him, basically, and decides to make these people his friends. It's a lot of just interview with this guy, and he talks about what he did and how he feels about what he did, what they did, and how that affected him, and whether he feels guilty about what he did. And he does definitely express some guilt, but he says that that is just how he had to behave in order to have some form of self-preservation, which is really interesting. It was very impactful because it has just a lot of him talking directly into camera, as well as a little bit of reenactment, but because it's just him standing there and talking about his life and the actions that he took, it was definitely very impactful and really very good. And I heard a lot of other people talking about it as we left the movie theatre. Then the next one was called Endgame, which is about hospice care and palliative care at the end of life, and follows one hospital and one hospice and their various patients in California. It was just incredibly sad. We follow one particular case all the way through from her just being in hospital full time and deciding whether or not to have hospice care, to have palliative care, right the way through until the end of her life. And we get to see her whole family and how it affects them. We get to see some other patients and their decisions, and patients in the hospice, and obviously we know what the eventual end for these people is going to be, but it's still just really emotional. And at the end of that film, the whole cinema, we heard a lot of nose blowing and a lot of sniffing and a lot of rustling of tissues, and it was just a really, really sad film. So yeah, I didn't enjoy that one very much. Then the next one was very, very short, and it's called A Night at the Garden, and is quite a controversial one. It's basically just historic archive footage of this event that took place in Madison Square Garden in 1939, before the Nazis invaded Poland. And 20,000 Americans attended this event in the garden for... It's basically just a Nazi supporters group, although it was never marketed as that. And it's just archive footage of this, so it's footage with sound. There's no commentary from the filmmakers or anybody else or anything like that. So we see people going in and coming out of the event, and we see people during the event. We see a speaker at the event getting interrupted by a protester, and we see the treatment of the protester as well, because that was all filmed. As I say, it's very short. I had no idea that something like that had happened in Madison Square Garden or in New York in general, or on that scale, 20,000 people. So it was interesting from that point of view, but I would have liked a little bit of background and a little bit more commentary on it than just the archival footage. I think if they'd have made it a little bit longer, it would have been a little bit more interesting. It was still interesting, but I don't think it's on the scale of the other documentaries in this category. Then we had Lifeboat, which follows a boat going out to rescue 3 lifeboats or rubber ships that have come out of the area between Syria and Libya. So these are refugees trying to get to Europe, trying to flee the conflict in their countries. I've heard a lot about these boats on the news, obviously, but this is an up-close and very personal documentary following the boats that are sent out from Europe to go and rescue these boats that are in trouble. And it gives the statistic that 1 in 18 of the people that leave on these boats actually drown and never make it to Europe. And this boat, over the course of 3 days, rescued 3,000 of them. It was great because it follows the whole rescue operation, from them spotting the boats to getting in contact with the boats to getting people off the boats to the state that the people are in when they come off the boats. They had interviews with the people, they had interviews with the ship's captain. They showed that they then destroy the boats afterwards. There was 2 rubber ones and 1 wooden one. They burned the wooden one and they kind of like slashed the rubber ones, so they can't be used again, because apparently if the boats then float back towards the shore, they'll get used by human traffickers, which is something that I wouldn't think of. I thought it was a really interesting and engaging film. Again, it deals with a tough subject, but a very, very strong film. I did really enjoy watching it. I enjoyed what it taught me. And I mean, it's definitely a strong contender. It seemed to affect people a lot, like Black Sheep did at the beginning. But the one that I was most excited about seeing, because I'd heard a little bit about it, and the one that would be my pick, it's not necessarily my prediction, but it's my favourite one of the bunch. It's called Period, End of Sentence, and it follows the affordable production of sanitary towels, and the guy that made this machine that can make them really cheaply. So we see a community in a small town in India, about 40 miles outside of New Delhi, and the before, during and after the arrival of this machine and this production. So they're asked about what menstruation is and if they know what it is, and whether they use sanitary towels and how they deal with it. And it's very much like, no, it's an illness, it only affects women, you know, we have to keep these things behind closed doors. We have to only deal with what we have to deal with after sundown. We can't go to school during it, and so we just have to drop out of school, which is a massive issue all around the world. But this focuses on this one particular community. The machines are brought in, and a group of women are trained how to use the machines to make the pads. They go into operation, they make them, they use them, they sell them. Not after they've been used, they sell them. They sell them to individuals, and they sell them to businesses as well, so that they can sell them on. And so we see them during that time, and then they interview people again afterwards. And it's interesting that a lot of the men who said, I don't need to worry about menstruation, it's a woman's illness. I don't know what menstruation is. It's not something that I've ever needed to know about. I've not been taught about it. I'm not going to talk about it. They were like, this machine is awesome. It's amazing what it's done for my wife. She's making more money than I am. I want one in my home. It's just a great thing. And yeah, I just thought it was an incredibly empowering thing, and I'm glad that it was brought to my attention, and I really enjoyed it. And like I say, I'd heard a little bit about it beforehand, and so that was the one I was kind of hyped to see, and it didn't disappoint me, so that was really good. And especially after the depressing content in a lot of the other short films, all of them, that one was very much like hopeful, and here's a happy ending for you, Catriona. So that was good. So yeah, this has been an incredibly long video, but we are talking about 17 films here. So yeah, my picks are because they are my favourite, not necessarily my predictions, but I hope you've enjoyed this video, and will and have enjoyed the other Oscars content that I am making. I will be back with another Oscars video for you tomorrow, so make sure you are subscribed so that lands in your subscription feed, and I will see you then.